Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Asaph Cafe. Asaph Cafe is a program where I play the piano and I invite a guest every week. And this is just impromptu, unscripted, whatever we're going to talk about. And my guest for this version of Asaph Cafe is a real dear friend of mine. Her name is Heather Stone. And Heather, if you look in front of that camera right there, you can wave and say hi. Okay. And her guide dog, her name is Chateau. Hi, Chateau. So she's just making herself at home, and I can see her right on camera here. And we're going to start off this program with the traditional Burt Bacharach's "This Guy's in Love with You." Sing along if you'd like to.
I don't know the words.
Okay.
I know the melody. And you play so beautifully.
Why, thank you, Heather. On that chord. They may have used this in the movies. I don't know. That's a good question.
Because I mean, as soon as you stop playing, it's like that one, repetitive part where it goes dun 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 dee. It's like I mean, I know I've heard it before I met you, so it's like.
Yeah, the name of the song is called "This Guy's in Love with You." The composer Burt Bacharach from the mid '60s wrote that song. And a famous trumpet player named Herb Alpert made it famous.
Okay, so this was a trumpet song.
Well, actually it was a love song, but since Herb Alpert was a trumpet player, he sang the lyrics to the song.
Oh, he didn't play the trumpet?
He did at the end.
Oh, okay.
When they were doing this part, well, they had like the little band, they were doing the music.
Okay.
And he was like singing the words, "This guy's in love with you," or however that goes, He was singing it, and he had his trumpet in his hand. And then after he went to the first verse, when they went to the second verse, he played the trumpet instead of the singing it while they were doing it. And it was about the same speed here, but he was playing under the trumpet.
And I've probably heard a trumpet version of it.
Yeah, you probably have. And then, of course, there were other artists over the years that have done that song since, like Dionne Warwick. Okay. And some of these artists that I'm mentioning probably go before your time.
Yeah.
But
I mean, like I've heard you say Dionne Warwick. It's like I know that name, but yeah, if you said name a song she's done.
Well, she.
But then if you played an album of hers, I'd probably be like, oh, I know that one.
Yeah. Well, these people were very famous in the early '60s, and when they were in their heyday.
Right.
And let's see, what is it? Her most famous song, if I could remember, is "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?" It goes like this. do you?
No.
Well, that is called "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?"
Okay, and she's... Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, it's okay. No, she made that song famous.
By singing it in nightclubs?
Well, actually, at that time, she would sing it a lot on television and records.
Ah, okay.
See, in those days, they didn't have the computers that we have today. There was no YouTube at that time.
Well, I still don't use that as a source.
And anyway, in the old days, they had what was called vinyl records.
Yeah, I know those.
Okay, and so Dionne Warwick sang that song on the vinyl records, and what they did was, let me give you a visual. Before the computers and YouTube and all came out.
Well, when I was growing up, it was variety shows and stuff.
Yes,
you know?
they had like the Dean Martin show.
Well, not that far back, but...
Okay. And the Carol Burnett show.
Well, maybe in reruns.
Okay.
You know, but like my introduction to usually new songs was like, you know, they would sing like on Johnny Carson, or they would sing on Merv Griffith in the afternoon, or you know, that's where I picked. That's how I knew what was new and.
That's a good point. That's one way that they introduced songs at that time. Merv Griffin, he was on, I think it was ABC, if I remember correctly.
I don't recall which station, but he was in the afternoon.
Yeah, and Johnny Carson was in the evening at NBC. And so if an artist had a song, like Do You Know the Way to San Jose with Dionne Warwick, they would sing it on those shows. Yeah. And a second way that they... The second way that they introduced song, they had what was called an old-fashioned recording studio, and it was like two separate rooms, similar to this studio that you're in now.
Okay.
And there was a glass in the middle between the two rooms. There was a big, thick glass.
Okay.
And so the singer and the band would be on one side of the room with the microphones, and then the engineer and the recording people were on the other side of the room. And so, like what Christian did when we started this program, they go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the band would start playing, and then the singer standing in front of the band in the studio would start singing, and they would record it.
Right.
And they had what was called it was quarter-inch tape. It was like the old-fashioned tape recorders. You remember when they used to have the how can I explain?
Are you talking about 8 tracks or the one that came after 8 tracks?
Before 8 tracks. They had what was called 3/4-inch tapes, and it was like a big old...
Oh, was it this one like the computer wheels?
Yeah, that spun around.
Yeah, okay.
And that was the way they used to record music at that time.
You know, where they used a lot of those big wheels was it was actually just on the other night, and you told me you liked the show Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And they had recorded something, and they were like brainwashing the crew.
Yeah.
And every time things spun around.
Okay, that's a great example. But you know, they weren't taking control of people's minds. Obviously, they used it to record it, and then after they recorded it, like they'll take like 2 or 3 takes, and then they would take the music from the. They have what's called a mixing board. It's like a big giant gadget of like a big giant tape recorder is a way to describe it. We had buttons and stuff on it when they were recording.
Okay.
They would take the music from the 3/4-inch tape and transfer it onto what was called a vinyl disc. You know, the old-fashioned records. Yeah, they would transfer the music electronically or however it was at the time.
Right.
And that's a crude analogy of how they did the records then. And it was painstaking and tedious work, and you normally had to wait like weeks.
But it came out very well.
But and then they would put the record on the old-fashioned record players with the needle, and the needle would, you know, spin on top of it. And then after about the billionth time you've listened to it, it's all kind of scratchy.
Yeah.
But then as the computers came along and the technology...
But you still get scratched CDs and stuff. So.
Yeah, well, the reason for that is because they took the old recordings that already had the scratching on it,
right.
And when they transfer it on to the new recordings, they can't take out the hiss sound.
Oh, yeah.
But see, the recordings the way they are now, instead of a needle being on it, it's just a laser light. So that means you can play it indefinitely because the light doesn't really scratch the surface of anything.
Right.
That's the way to describe it. So we're all fancy now. I want to play a song called "My Old Kentucky Home."
Okay.
I don't know if you'll recognize it or not. They do it every year.
I think you played it at the mall when I was there.
Yeah. My old Kentucky home.
And there's the shake.
That's okay. Looks great on camera. Now she's like waving at the audience a little bit.
She's waving?
Well, her tail wagging.
Oh.
All that. Let's play a song for Chateau.
I don't know. How much is the puppy in the window? Waggity tail. Waggity tail. That was for you.
Yes, that's for Chateau. She's standing now, and she looks great on camera, too. And, anyway, getting back to what we were talking about the old-fashioned recordings, that's how they did it. And then when we got all fancy, laser lights, so we can do it indefinitely now. And, of course, we have YouTube. Now you can put a recording on YouTube. You don't have to go to the old-fashioned record studios anymore like in the past. You know, you can just record yourself at home and put it on YouTube.
Right, but it's not professional.
Well, probably not, but everybody seems to like it anyway.
Yeah, well, that's a problem with our society.
Yeah, so anyway, but
I mean, when I think back to the Jackson 5, you know, and the Osmonds, I mean, they all had to be right on cue.
yeah, but that's the way it was
you
at
know,
that time.
You know, and I think those recordings are better than any boy band today.
Yeah, I think you're right about it. But these days, anybody can, you know, post something on the music now.
Right, but I mean, it almost makes it like instant. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, used to listen to Craig Ferguson.
Yeah?
You know, and he would say, today, when you say someone's a celebrity, it doesn't mean actually a star.
Right, I agree, yeah.
So, and I thought, and that's true because it's like anyone can have the 15 minutes on YouTube.
That is correct. That's just our sign of our time.
You know, but I mean, in the old days, they would call that, you know, the one-hit wonders. Mm-hmm. You know, but really, if you really are a true performer, you're going to be able to build a lifetime of albums.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Craig Ferguson, that song, My Old Kentucky Home,
Yeah.
they play that at the Kentucky Derby every year on television. It's like once a year. They have 3 horse racing events, which you're probably familiar with.
Triple Crown.
Triple Crown, the Preakness, and the Kentucky Derby.
Derby.
And getting back to Craig Ferguson, there was a famous horse called Secretariat.
Oh, yeah. And the Secretariat was on the show every
Yeah,
night.
so when Craig Ferguson did it, it was based on the Secretariat of the Kentucky Derby races. Now, the real Secretariat was very fast.
Yes.
I think it won like the Kentucky Derby once or twice or something.
Yes.
Now, Craig Ferguson's version, obviously, is just 2 people in a horse costume.
Right.
One guy's in the front, and they used the voice of Morgan Freeman, the actor.
Yes, which actually was Josh Robert Thompson, who was doing the voice of his sidekick, Jeff Peterson, too.
But they focused more on Secretariat, and it was funny.
Yeah.
Now, Craig Ferguson just recently retired, I understand.
Yes, December 19th.
Was that last year or this year?
December 19th, 2014.
December, yeah, 14. Now, the Late Late Show still comes on, but what they're doing now until, I guess, they find a permanent
it's rotating guest host.
Yeah, and I was impressed when I saw Regis Philbin.
I did see the one with, the first night I didn't care for his guest, but the second night he did have David Letterman and Paul Schaefer.
I saw that one.
And Paul Schaefer, I've always been a big fan of because I'm just always been amazed that he reminds me of Doc Sevison. It's like he could play anything at any time, no matter what the guests. You know, were known for or requested or...
Yeah. Paul Schaefer is very skilled. In fact, there was an episode on Letterman once where they featured Paul Schaefer by himself without the band.
Was it when he wrote his book?
No, this was years ago, and he did a Mozart piece on the piano.
Oh.
A strictly classical Mozart piece. I don't remember the name of the song. And it was all by himself, you know, so... He got into his classical mode, and he played that thing all the way through, and it was very impressive.
Yeah, because he usually doesn't do the classical stuff. And he
was featured that night by himself, so he decided to play a classical piece. And see, the thing about those people that play in talk show bands and stuff like that, a lot of people just assume these musicians cannot play. That's the misconception.
I don't never thought that. Because
Yeah,
it's like you have
I
to
don't
be
mean
able
you
to,
personally, but I mean I've heard that in music
that's just
circles.
silly because I mean how many people can just pull up a song and start playing it just like that?
That's right. And a lot of these people, like Paul Schaefer and Elton John, they can play, Chopin and classical music and stuff.
Yeah, and then they can do.
But the reason they have the
Pop stuff.
misconception is because when you watch Letterman, you don't see a full song all the way through because
Right.
they're going to a commercial. But what the audience doesn't realize is that even though you and I see the commercial,
Yeah,
the people there see the entire song being played.
yes.
So,
Because I mean that's what Craig Ferguson used to always say is I don't have a band to go to commercial. We're gonna pipe in some elevator music.
yeah, that's the way they do it.
Nobody playing there.
This is called Call Me. This goes before your time.
Okay. Well, a lot of things go before my time, but I still can.
Do you know this song? I'll do it again.
I'm working on it. No, it's not. I'm not matching it to anything I know.
Okay. That is a song called Call Me. Mel Torme made that song famous.
Okay.
I don't know if you know who he was. but-
Again, I know his name, and I bet I might recognize something else of his.
Yeah, okay. Well, he was known as the Velvet Fog as a young man.
Velvet Fog.
Yeah, that was his nickname because when he was like in his 30s at the time, he would do all these love ballads.
Oh,
And he had a beautiful voice. And then when he got a little bit physically older, he changed his music style from the ballads to jazz. He was singing, what was called scat. Like, deep, 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 deep,
Oh.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And he was very good at it. So he would do like a ballad now and then, and he'd turn around and do the scat, they
I'm
called it.
probably. I bet if I heard you played some of his scat, I would know it.
Yeah, well, I couldn't do it on the piano.
Yeah, I
that's
know that.
that's a singing kind of a talent.
Right.
So Mel Torme was quite the entertainer, quite the singer. His career, from what I understand about him, didn't really launch until he got into his 50s. Yeah, I mean, he was already
Well,
famous.
just like you.
Yeah, he was already famous prior to that, yeah. And he was doing some great stuff. He was on television a lot and what have you.
Yeah.
But when he got into his 50s, his career just skyrocketed. And then, of course, when he got a little bit physically older, they put him on a television show called Night Court. I don't know if you...
Oh, I remember that. Harry Anderson.
Yeah. Mel Torme was the idol of the judge, the character that Harry Anderson played.
Oh, I don't recall that.
And, well, they had a big... the judge had a big picture, like portrait picture of Mel Torme.
Oh, that's probably why I didn't. Unless
The way
he,
on the show.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while they would bring Mel Torme on the program for real, and it was so funny
Oh, okay.
because Mel Torme thought that this judge was crazy.
Well, he was.
Yeah, and so that's why it worked.
You know, it was night court.
Yeah, and so that's kind of a flyover of Mel Torme's career, but he was an amazing singer, and he was also an amazing drummer.
Oh, I like drummers.
Yeah, he could drum, and he was also a piano player too.
Oh. I don't know if that's getting on camera, but that's what he
That's
likes
okay.
to do.
That's okay. Hey, she can make herself at home in the cafe.
Yeah.
It's no different than you're at Denny's. She would probably get up in front of you anyway when you're.
Oh no, I don't let her climb on me in a real restaurant.
Okay, well, this is an imaginary restaurant here, so.
Yeah.
So she can do that. But
But I let her do this on the bus.
oh, it's cool.
So.
It's great. Well, it looks great on camera, so.
But I mean,
yeah.
she's so well trained, she's not going for the popcorn or anything.
Yeah, the
So-
popcorn's right in front of you.
Yeah.
But Mel Torme was just a fantastic personality singer. But there are a lot of people from the past that some of these people, their careers didn't really launch. I mean, really launch till they got in their 50s. Like Angela Lansbury. She did the program Murder, She Wrote.
Oh yeah, I remember heard that too.
Yeah, and of course she did a lot of
Like,
musicals
yeah.
and movies.
Well, bed
when she was
knobs
younger.
and broomsticks, I think it was called, that Disney movie.
Probably. And she was in the movie with Victor Mature, Samson and Delilah. She
Okay.
played Delilah's sister, and Samson chose Lansbury's character. See, there was a scene in there, I don't know if you saw this or heard this film, but It was a scene where Samson was fighting.
Film?
Yeah,
Okay.
Samson was fighting this big wrestler.
Oh.
And how that came about. And they take artistic license in these Bible movies, so some of the stuff you see is not really what's in the Bible, but it's Hollywood film.
So this the guy who got his strength from his hair?
Yeah.
Oh,
Samson.
okay.
So they made a movie in the, I think it was in the late 40s, early 50s, called Samson and Delilah. And Angela Lansbury, as a young woman, was in this film. So she played Delilah's sister, because, Angela Lansbury had that beautiful blonde hair. She still does, the blonde hair.
I never even asked what color hair she had.
Well, blonde. But she was really young in this picture, and Samson had just fought the lion.
Okay.
And killed it.
Okay.
Just like in the Bible. That's in the Bible.
Yes.
And then Delilah's, the king and his entourage with Angela Lansbury comes up to where the dead lion was, and Delilah says, Samson killed the lion. And the king didn't believe it. So he tells the big wrestler, why don't you go and beat up this braggart?
Oh, okay.
And Samson's like, I don't have anything against this guy. I don't want to fight him. But he didn't have no choice. So this guy was really big and tall and just huge. This wrestler guy.
Like a sumo wrestler.
Yeah, just big guy.
Okay.
And he pulls out this sword. He's going to whip Samson with it. Now, that's not in the Bible. It's this Hollywood movie,
How can you whip someone with a sword?
I mean, not a sword, a whip.
Oh, okay.
The wrestler pulls out this whip, right?
Okay.
So he's swinging it around, and Samson did not want to fight him. So finally, the wrestler goes to hit Samson with the whip.
Okay.
And Samson grabs the whip, pulls it forward, pulls the wrestler forward, and he picks up the wrestler with his bare hands, and he spins him around a little bit, and he slams him to the ground. And the king looks in shock, because he didn't realize Samson was that strong.
Right.
So the king, he had to keep his bargain, see? So he says to Samson, okay, I tell you what, since we made a deal and you beat the wrestler, you can pick whatever one of these two girls you want. And Delilah just assumed that Samson was going to pick her. But Samson picks Angela Lansbury.
Okay.
And then that ticks off Delilah, so she turns against Samson, of course.
And cuts his hair, doesn't she?
Well, she turns to the Philistines, and she says, okay, I'll fix that Samson. I'll tell you guys the secret of his strength.
Okay.
Now, that part's in the Bible as far as Delilah, trying to get him to tell the secret of his strength. And, of course, I think it's in the book of Kings in the Old Testament. And the secret to Samson's strength was his hair. He never cut his hair. He was what was called a Nazarite, I think was the term they used in the Old Testament. And he was told by, his parents was told by the angel, don't cut his hair. That's the secret to his strength. And what does he do? Samson's like, you don't love me. You won't tell me the secret of his strength. And he lied a couple of times, And what does she do? She turns him in. Like the first time, he said something about, if you just tie my hair up in little beads, I'll be weak. So she goes and tells the Philistines, and the Philistines come, and she says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And, of course, he snaps the chain, because that wasn't, or the ropes, I should say, because that wasn't the secret of his strength. And finally, after she pestered him in the Old Testament, he caves in and tells her. And so in the film, they kind of did it that way. But like I mentioned, in the film, they took some artistic license that's not in the Old Testament, but, because it's a Hollywood movie. And they put all that dramatic music in there and stuff like that. So I'm going to play Prelude and See while we're talking. I've done it for you. And finally, Samson gives in and tells Delilah the secret of his strength. And then she goes and turns him in. And of course, in the Old Testament, what they did, they gashed out his eyes so he couldn't see.
Oh, lovely.
And so in the movie, since it was a Hollywood movie, they made it really kind of fancy. They're like, we're going to fix you, Samson. And they took this sword and they heated it up with fire. This is going to be the last thing you ever see, Samson. And then, of course, they put the burning sword up to the camera lens, and it's supposed to represent Samson getting his eyes burned out. That's pretty gruesome, but... And then, of course, in the movie, Samson asked the Lord to give him his strength back one last time. because they were making fun of Samson because he was weak and couldn't see. But in the Old Testament, his hair grew back, but he still didn't have his strength, even though his hair grew back. So in the movie, what they did, they just put him between the two pillars, like in the Old Testament, and they were laughing at him. The king was laughing at him, and all the people up on the second floor of the tower. It's like this big Colosseum, like a Roman Colosseum, in the film. And so he asked the Lord to give him strength one more time. And so Samson puts his two hands in the pillars, and he pushes the pillars that supported the Colosseum, so the whole Colosseum comes crashing down.
Oh, awesome.
And that's
how
what
they get for laughing at him.
Yeah, and for laughing at him. So, and poking out his eyes and all the other stuff. Now, in the Old Testament, that's how Samson dies. He takes out 3,000 Philistines that day.
But it also comes down on him.
Yeah, it comes down on him too. So they had to portray that in the film, see? So, and in the film, the king that kind of liked Delilah, but he knew she was no good. Just when Samson gets his strength, and just when he's about to die, he just says, Delilah. Because he knew it was coming. And then the whole Colosseum just caved in the film. So, everybody goes to heaven that day, I guess.
Oh, not Delilah.
Well, in the movies anyway, you know. I don't know about real life, but in the movies, you know. Nobody goes to hell in the movies, but I guess it'd be too gross, but it's a Hollywood film. And it was kind of a cheesy little film, so.
You mean low budget?
Probably. But that's the way it was that time. And, you know, they tried to keep it as accurate in some parts of the Old Testament, and then they take artistic license, and they even say in the beginning of some of the movies, we take an artistic license, and they start add stuff that in there just to make it more interesting.
Well, my favorite biblical film was King of Kings with Jeffrey Hunter.
Yeah, I remember that.
And when I was very little and had it on for the first time and they were nailing him to the cross, I thought well, you know, I definitely do not want to be nailed to a cross.
Well, no, it's just a Hollywood movie.
Yeah.
But it kind of looks like he's being nailed to a cross.
Yeah.
But the real Jesus actually did die on a cross in the New Testament. So what they do is they take these movies and they try to duplicate that for film. But getting back to Jeffrey Hunter, how I became familiar with him, I think I told you I have two moms. And my birth mother, she was a big fan of Jeffrey Hunter because in the early 60s he was very famous.
Okay.
Not just the King of Kings, but he did like he did the original pilot to the Star Trek
I was going to
series.
say,
Yeah.
I know him, I first actually knew him from the original pilot because in the 80s they like restarted or something. And it was like the first time it had aired since.
Well, let me tell you the history of Star Trek as far as the
And
the
then when
television.
King of Kings came on, I'm like, oh, wait a second, I think that's the same guy.
It was Jeffrey Hunter.
Yeah.
But I became familiar with Jeffrey Hunter because he did this psychological thriller in the early 60s where he was this bad guy, and to escape from the law, he goes into this mental institution, and they were going to get him out, was the deal.
What was that called?
Oh, I don't remember the
Oh.
name of the film.
Okay.
I barely remember it. I was a little boy when I watched it. And, of course, they kept him trapped in the insane asylum. So when he was telling the people he was really not crazy, everybody thought he was crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Because the bad guys did not honor their word and get him out of there. So that's kind of the premise of that. And then, of course, getting back to Star Trek, Jeffrey Hunter did the original pilot.
Right, which they aired in the series in the first season, but they had Spock like.
You know, Spock was very young. Well, see, what happened was in the original.
He was like in a wheelchair or a few.
Yeah, well, before
and
that.
then they like flashed back and they used parts from the pilot, but
That
then
is correct.
But in the 80s, they actually showed the pilot in syndication complete without it being part of. Oh, the Menagerie, I think was the name of
Menagerie,
the episode. Yeah.
But see, I have a copy of the original pilot at home, and I have the version I have has the footage that they didn't use in the first pilot. I have the entire pilot in my collection. And what they did, NBC accepted the show, but didn't like that version. The original Cage is what it was called.
Oh, right. Yes.
NBC didn't like that, so what NBC did was they gave Gene Roddenberry a second chance to make a second pilot, and that's when they brought in William Shatner, and it worked.
Yeah, but they kept Spock.
Yeah, they kept Spock's character, and then when these actors got older, as they went into like their second or third season, when they made the menagerie, that's how come they were able to, everybody could look younger, because they took the actual footage from the cage and attached some scenes with the menagerie.
Right, and they had different, I remember when saying they had different uniforms.
Yeah, a little bit different uniforms. But Jeffrey Hunter was very, very famous in his time. He was probably one of the most well-known actors in his time.
Well, now, see, I didn't
He really
know
was.
that because, I mean, like you said, you have a poster here of, was it Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn and, you know, Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, and, I mean, you have those names, but Jeffrey Hunter's name does not seem to come up hardly at all.
Yeah, but he was very famous, though. He really was.
But then why has he been forgotten, while the others have not?
Well, one reason could be because he passed away at a relatively young age. That could have been one reason.
But so did James Dean, and everyone remembers him.
Yeah, and then also, from what I understand about Jeffrey Hunter, he started going a different direction in his career.
Well, you said Mel Toad Maine did that too.
Yeah, no, what I mean is, what I mean by different direction is, if I understand correctly, he wasn't doing as much movies as he did, or television shows, I should say. I guess he was trying to break away from that Hollywood scene and do other types of stuff.
Like plays, I mean?
Yeah, maybe musicals, plays, that sort of thing,
okay.
or...
So he didn't want a motion picture career anymore.
Probably not.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, he probably made enough money, he could do what he wanted.
Yeah, but in his time, he was very, very well known. So that's kind of the history of Hunter. And of course, probably younger actors are coming along, and you know, sometimes the novelty wears off when you're very popular. As the younger actors start coming along, that might have had something to do with him falling out of the limelight too a little bit. Maybe doing plays and not getting as much acting roles as he once did, and you know, all those.
But he might not have been pursuing them either.
Yeah, I don't. From what I understand, he probably wasn't.
Remember the old TV show Combat?
Yes, I do.
And Vic Morrow, like, and I think the other guy was Rick something.
Okay, I don't remember. It's been so many years since.
Yeah, he was Lieutenant Henley. And they were supposed to have a start. They were supposed to alternate every week. Vic Morrow have a story, and this other guy have a story. But then Vic Morrow got more popular, and Rick said, "Oh, that's fine. You know, I'm already on a contract. If you want to work harder, go right ahead." But I was listening to an interview later in his career, and because Vic Morrow, you know, died in that helicopter accident on the.
I remember that.
Yeah, but the guy who played Lieutenant Hanley, he lived on, and he was, you know, he was like guest starring like on shows like Airwolf and Knight Rider. You know,
I remember all those shows.
Yeah, he was guest like the guest of the week. He wasn't, you know, no one was looking for him to put him in a show every week. You know. Right. And I remember him saying, in his opinion, you don't retire from Hollywood. Hollywood retires you.
That's true. That's true. You're only as good to Hollywood as your popularity holds out, or what you can.
Well, they used to say your last film.
Yeah.
But then there was some famous Western cowboy star who made a flop, and then I'm trying to remember, his next movie made like $70,000, which in that time was a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And
that happens to a lot of people. They make these movies and they're disasters, and then they're kind of forgotten. It's like you're good, like you said, you're as good as your last film.
But sometimes they're not, because some people have come back and made better films.
Right.
So I think what this Rick guy from Combat was saying was more accurate. Hollywood retires you. You don't retire from Hollywood.
That's correct. And on that note, we're going to conclude this version of the first part of Asaph Cafe. See, time just goes by
fast.
Yeah, it's already been over 45 minutes.
Can't believe it. It flies by.
And I'm going to put you on the second cafe as soon as we do. So I'm going to sign up, but let me just do some music as I sign out of here. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in for Asaph Cafe. And my guest again is Heather Stone and her companion guide
Not
dog,
companion.
Or
I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
That's okay.
so many people get companion dogs and service dogs mixed up.
oh, okay.
Chateau is not a companion dog. She is an official service dog.
Service dog.
And-
I stand corrected. And then when we do the second part of the show, we can talk more about Chateau if you'd like.
Okay.
And that was why I wanted to have you be on this program today.
Well, that's what you said, but we started talking about movies and music. And
That's fine. Well, we do 2 tapings, so we can pick up where we left off.
Yeah.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in for Asaph Cafe. And until our next show with my guest, Heather, Maranatha. Make yourself at home. I'm going to turn this off.